Netflix, I think, will have to really hit that sweet spot of offering added value or added options without alienating people who have been used to watching a certain way.
Hey gang, it's Thursday, May 19th. Paul, Ross, and listeners, welcome to the Behind the Numbers Daily, a new marketer podcast made possible by M-Particle. I'm Marcus, and as you can tell from my voice, it's a morning recording. I'm joined today by two folks. We have with us our principal analyst who heads up our advertising and media practice. It's Paul Verna.
Good to be here and good morning.
Oh, is it? Is it, Paul? We'll see.
You should have stayed in the UK, Marcus, and then it would have been an evening recording for you, or afternoon.
I'm going back. Enough of this. We're also joined by Ross Benish, who's one of our senior analysts covering TV and video. Hey, Ross.
Hey, Marcus.
Hello there. Today's fact: over 80% of people in the world have never taken a flight, says aircraft maker Boeing. Some estimates suggest that closer to 90% of the world's population have never been on an airplane, and even fewer of the world's population flies on planes regularly.
Every flight I'm on is completely booked, filled, so I guess the 10% of us who do fly are really making the most of the available flights.
Yeah, it's like being in the States, being at the airport, feeling like every flight is packed. It does feel like everyone's flying. It's like when everyone is on the internet, but really, no. We did a stat the other day, 57% of people in the world are on the internet and 43% are not. So yeah, one of those things we kind of take for granted, but all of the world nearly have not been on a plane. Today's real topic: Netflix, but with ads. After years of saying no to having ads on its platform, Netflix is now open to offering lower price tiers with ads, according to co-CEO Reed Hastings. Last month, he said the company was going to eventually add a cheaper ad-supported tier within a few years. But according to the New York Times, a recent note to employees said executives are now aiming to introduce the ad tier at some point in Q4 of this year, 2022. With a crackdown on password sharing starting in the same window. We don't yet know how an ad-supported model would look, what the pricing options might be, but we're still going to talk about it. We're going to look at it from the perspective of Netflix. How might this affect them? How might an ad tier affect consumers? And how might an ad tier affect advertisers? We'll start with Netflix, gents. Paul, I'll come to you first. Fill in the blank for me. The way a new ad-supported tier will affect Netflix will be blank.
I think it could be a game changer.
Oh.
All predicated on how they do it and how they designed the ad program and how they execute it. But our colleague Max Willens talks about a new advertising billionaires club where all these different companies, some of which we don't think of as being in the ad business, are suddenly big players in advertising. Obviously, Netflix could vault into that club just overnight. I think if they do it right, it could really help their business and put them on more solid footing. But, the devil will be in the details.
Yeah, we're going to be talking about that $1 billion ad club in another episode a little bit later, but it's an interesting concept. There are a lot of companies, as Paul mentioned, who are vaulting into that $1 billion ad revenue club. And Netflix, could be one very interesting case. It can increase average revenue per user, so it could be very good for its business. Sarah Fisher of Axios was pointing out that Hulu, for example, makes much more money from its users who subscribe to its cheaper ad-supported tier, which is what nearly 60% of its subscribers choose, according to Antenna. Ross, for you, the way a new ad-supported tier will affect Netflix will be blank.
I'm going to say it's more moderate. I think subscription revenue is still going to significantly outpace advertising revenue, even if they do advertising correctly. Netflix is a much more expensive product than Hulu is. So I see it being a more moderate thing for them for the foreseeable future.
Yeah.
They're doing it because they're under duress. They're not really doing it because it's something they've always wanted to do. And I don't think it's going to fix all the problems they're having. It will boost average revenue per user. It certainly will do that. But even if they add $1 billion or $2 billion in ad spend in their first year, they're still going to face enormous pressure as long as subscriber growth is at where it's at.
Yeah. So how much is that going to throttle the growth of this tier? Because to Ross's point, they are doing this kind of to satisfy anxious investors to a certain degree. In Q1, Netflix lost 200,000 subscribers. It's the first time they lost subscribers in over 10 years. They lost 600,000 in the US and Canada. And revenue was down to 10% from the 20 to 30% range it had enjoyed in recent years. That was in Q1, that 10%. They also made such a big deal of having no ads. Peter Kafka of Recode noting that Netflix long made ad-free streaming a core part of its brand. How much is all of this kind of haphazard or seemingly rushed rollout, as well as a company who's branded themselves as a company with no ads, how much will that affect them ultimately rolling out a new ad tier and its uptake?
Well, I think it could be a significant impediment. I mean, brands establish themselves with a certain business model or a certain product or a certain image, and Netflix has always been about the subscription, not about ads. And to Ross's point, yeah, I think they were forced into this. I mean, this is a company that historically has always been ahead of the curve and pivoted and innovated in ways that actually created markets and forced pretty much everyone else to follow their lead. This is the exact opposite. You know, Netflix is basically doing this reluctantly, kicking and screaming, and way too late. If they were going to do this, they should have done it 5 years ago, or they should have done something totally different. So I think there are a lot of risks and pitfalls about the way they're going about it and what it might do to the brand. So again, my earlier comment was predicated on everything about it being like textbook of how you should do it, but there's no guarantee at all that that's the way it's going to play out.
And something I want to add to Paul's point is this could affect content production. Netflix has been very friendly to artists and creators, giving them free reign. Something like Squid Game, probably not the most safe thing for advertisers when there's a bunch of people killing themselves constantly in each episode. A lot of Netflix's biggest shows were made for people to pay to watch them, not to sit and watch them and have them monetized through ads. Ad-driven model, you tend to see more bland lifestyle content and less edgy stuff, which is what is often made Netflix's shows stick.
That's an interesting point. Finally, how this could affect Netflix, Catherine Perloff and Molly Kahane of Adweek noting a big challenge for Netflix, more than publishers like Hulu or Peacock, which have ad-supported tiers, is that the company is global and therefore requires global partners to get this ad thing going. Let's move to consumers. The way a new ad-supported tier, Ross, will affect consumers will be blank.
I think it'll mostly be detrimental to the UX experience, but in markets outside the US, it'll probably allow more consumers to afford Netflix who haven't been able to afford it. But it all comes down to how much they're going to crack down on password sharing. So right now, it's pretty easy to get Netflix for free. You just have to know someone who has Netflix. If they crack down on password sharing pretty significantly, then the ad model opens up more opportunities for people who weren't willing to pay, more than $10 a month, but maybe will pay, 6 or 7 as long as they serve some ads.
Yeah. There was some research, guys, from Civic Science, just over 3,500 folks they surveyed. It's around Easter time of this year. And they asked if Netflix offered a lower priced or free ad-supported service, which of these best describes what you would do? 32%, most people, said they currently use Netflix and would keep the ad-free version. Second place was 17%, so a lot less, said they currently use Netflix and would likely switch to a lower priced or free version. 10% of people said they currently use Netflix but do not own an account. Paul, for you, the way a new ad-supported tier will affect consumers will be blank.
Well, it certainly could give them more options for whom affordability is an issue. But again, Netflix, I think, will have to really hit that sweet spot of offering added value or added options without alienating people who have been used to watching a certain way. So I think the ads have to be served the right way, carefully, moderated ad loads, and a lot of things about it have to play out just right in order for it to be a plus for Netflix and for consumers for that matter.
Yeah, there's a lot of questions. What will the ad experience look like? Insider Intelligence analyst Daniel Konstantinovich asks, how frequently will ad-supported viewers have content interrupted? For how long? There's also the question of how will Netflix's ad platform deal with users' personal data? For me, gents, the big question here as well is the price. So what's the new ad-supported tier going to be priced at? To look at some other examples, Hulu with ads, that's $7. Without is $13. So 7 with, 13 without. HBO Max is 10 with, 15 without. Disney Plus is going to provide one, a streaming tier without ads. Their without version is $8, and Netflix planning to release one. Their without ads version is either $10, $15, $50, or $20. I guess this has to be below 10 because you can't have it be more expensive than the basic Netflix package without ads. So I imagine this is coming in under $10 for the Netflix without ads version.
Unless if they were going to raise the price of the larger tier and split the difference.
Yeah.
But
they might
the
reshuffle
difference
the
between
others.
ad-supported plans and ad-free plans, pricing has grown. If you look at like CBS All Access, which is now Paramount Plus several years ago, and Hulu 7 years ago, it used to just be a few dollars, but now as CTV advertising becomes bigger and they're able to monetize those users more effectively, you're seeing, $5, $6, $7 gaps between the price that you pay for one versus the other.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You have to pay more of a premium to avoid ads than you used to have to, is the way of looking at it.
Right. I could see maybe a $5.99 perhaps. We'll see. It's interesting because HBO Max, there was this note from Antenna. Last summer they introduced their with ads version. 6 months later, end of 2021, ad-supported plans made up 8%. 8% of its total subscriptions. The other 92% are ad-free, as according to Antenna. Let's move to advertisers, gents. Paul, I'll start with you. The way a new ad-supported tier will affect advertisers will be blank.
Well, I think it'll be a positive change for advertisers. They've been wanting access to Netflix's huge audience. So again, it'll come down to the pricing, the ad product, the options, just exactly how it rolls out. But certainly advertisers have been chomping at the bit to basically be able to reach more of the streaming audience that they haven't been able to reach.
Yeah. Ross, where do you land? Because there's one side, which is Monica Hillane, again of Adweek, saying, if Netflix debuts an ad-supported model in 2022, the change could have implications for this year's upfront negotiations, causing marketers to reevaluate how they allocate their dollars across linear and streaming. So they could be excited about it and be thinking about moving budgets. On the other hand, will advertisers be nervous buying ads from Netflix? John Coblin and Nicole Sperling of the New York Times note that Netflix has no advertising sales experience, while rivals like Disney, Warner Brothers, Discovery, and Paramount have vast advertising infrastructure. So for you, the way a new ad-supported tier will affect advertisers will be blank.
It'll be significant. I believe Netflix will add more quality streaming inventory than what's out there now, unless if they're only limiting it to like 1 minute per hour of ads, but I don't think that'll be the case. Even with 4 minutes per hour, the inventory will expand because the time spent on Netflix is so much greater than the time spent on these other ad-supported platforms like Paramount or Peacock or Hulu. I don't believe that the lack of infrastructure will be too huge of an impediment in the long run. It may make it tough to get going, but advertisers are so eager to work with Netflix that I believe they will overcome that. But as far as it impacting the upfronts, that's probably a conversation more for next year. The upfronts are happening right now. So there's not enough details about Netflix's plans at this moment to really impact conversations that advertisers are having with TV networks tomorrow morning, but it would impact upfronts in future years.
Yeah, I totally agree. The timing of the upfronts is such that it's not going to factor into the current upfronts, except maybe just as a conversation topic, but not in terms of hard negotiations. And yeah, I think to the point about the infrastructure, I agree with Ross. I would go even further and say that it's a non-issue. And again, not to get too far ahead of the Billionaires Club episode, but many of those companies had no prior experience in advertising, and suddenly they are big players.
Good point.
That's not to minimize what it takes to run an ad business, and I think Netflix will discover that, but they're a smart company. They'll hire the right people, and they'll present an offering that I think advertisers will judge on its own merit and not on how much experience the company has in that line of work or in that business.
Well, that's it for the lead. It's time now for the halftime report. Paul, start with you. Your takeaway from the first half is blank.
It's going to be a whole new ball game with Netflix getting into ads. It'll be really interesting to watch how it unfolds for Netflix, for the industry, and for us average consumers.
And Ross, your big takeaway?
The introduction of ads will be a boon for advertisers, but I'm not convinced that it will solve Netflix's woes.
We'll see. It's time now for In Other News, but first a quick word from our sponsor, mParticle. At the end of the day, your customer has to be at the center of everything you do. This starts with the right customer data strategy as well as the right foundation to solve the challenges that typically inhibit success, such as data quality, data governance, and connectivity. mParticle is your real-time customer data infrastructure that helps you accelerate your data strategy by cleansing, visualizing, and integrating your customer data from anywhere to anywhere. Ultimately, better data leads to better decisions, better customer experiences, and better outcomes. See why the best brands choose mParticle. Go to www.mparticle.com. Folks, we are back today in other news. What's so good about overlay ads? And what kind of an impact can Peacock's new ad formats have? Story 1. Ad-supported CTV providers should roll out overlay ads. Those ads that overlay on top of a TV show you're watching without interrupting it. Why? Because they're less intrusive, more affordable, and slightly stickier. According to a new study by IPG's Magna Unis and GumGum, writes Michael Bergy of Digiday. GumGum CEO Phil Schrader says that they haven't yet caught on broadly, given they're not easily incorporated into the post-production process. But Ross, the potential of overlay ads is blank.
It's minimal. It's a nice tactic to have in the arsenal, and things like Hulu's pause ads have been effective, but they're not a full replacement for large-scale video ads, even if they are less intrusive.
They're saying overlays, according to this study, were perceived to be less distracting. Just 17% of people saying they disrupt the viewing experience.
These studies are often commissioned by companies that are involved in the selling of the product they're describing, though.
This is true. This is how it goes. Story 2. NBC Universal's streaming service Peacock just unveiled 2 ad formats at its first in-person New Fronts presentation. The first is called Peacock Frame Ads, where brands frame the screen with relevant messaging and purchase offers. It's highly targeted, airing during quieter moments in live programming or end credits, leveraging live data and even sports stats, writes Bill Bradley of Adweek. So an awards show host could mention a beauty product and then a purchasing opportunity pops up on the screen. The second new ad type is called the Peacock InScene ad. Laura Mullen, president of ads and partnerships at NBC Universal, says, think of a scene in the show Bel-Air when Will is driving around LA and there are billboards that we can actually place a marketer's ad in those billboards. When a user plays an episode, a marketer's brand or product is dynamically placed in the frame of targeted scenes. Paul, the new ad format that will have the biggest impact of these two will be blank.
I think it's a toss-up. I think both of these have interesting aspects, but I think they are both probably overrated in how much actual business they can drive. I mean, they both have limitations. I think the ability to drive direct action from a CTV ad is kind of overrated. I think a lot of people might have an impulse to buy something they see on a red carpet broadcast, but for the most part, they kind of make a mental note and do it afterwards. I don't think the capability of actually executing that action on the show is essential. Regarding the InScene ads, this kind of harkens back to a very old concept by now of dynamic insertion of in-game ads, which has been around for probably like 15 years. Interesting, and I could see some place for it, but the number of times that it will be appropriate to actually insert an ad in a scene in a show is, probably not that high. So these are interesting things, but not really game changers.
That's all we've got time for today's episode. Thank you to my guests. Thank you to Paul.
Thank you, Marcus.
Thank you, Ross.
Thanks, Marcus.
Thank you to Todd, who's editing today's show. Thanks to everyone listening in. We'll see you tomorrow for the Behind the Numbers Weekly Listen, an eMarketer podcast made possible by mParticle.